Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's panel on Selective Outrage, part of our celebration of International Education Week. We are excited to host this important conversation with a distinguished group of student leaders. Before we dive into this topic, let me take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Dana Livingston. I am the Director of Vincentian Service and Social Justice within the university's Institute for Vincentian Impact, and I'm also an adjunct professor in the Department for Course Studies. I'm also the co-chair of CRS's Global Campus Committee on our campus. The CRS Global Campus Committee is dedicated to fostering global engagement and cultural awareness on our campus. Through various events and discussions, we strive to create safe spaces where students, faculty, and staff can engage with pressing global issues, learn from one another, and contribute to positive social change. Today's discussion on selective outrage is particularly timely as it addresses how we respond to social media and political issues, particularly the way outrage can be uneven or selective depending on various factors such as personal biases, media narratives, and political ideologies. Now, let's define what we mean by selective outrage. Selective outrage refers to the tendency of people to feel and express anger about certain issues while ignoring or downplaying other issues that may be equally or more significant. This selective response can be influenced by factors such as cultural biases, media influence, social trends, and even political affiliation. It plays a crucial role in shaping social justice movements, public opinion, and activism. And it's a phenomenon that's increasingly shaping the conversations we have on both local and global stages. In today's panel, we'll explore how selective outrage manifests in our communities and around the world, and we'll discuss its implications for activism, justice, and ethical responsibility. Now let's introduce our student panelists. First, Sophia Feeney.
Hi, my name is Sophia Feeney. I'm a junior majoring in international management, minoring in economics and French. I am the president of the student organization Balkan Club here on campus, along with the treasurer for Women on Wall Street. I'm also a peer leader for our first year seminar class and an ambassador. And along with that, I participate with campus ministry in plunges. So last year I went to Vermont. This year I'll be going to the Philippines. And then along with other research incentives with our GLOBE program that stands for Global Loan Opportunity for Budding Entrepreneurs. And I guess my overall goals are to work in policy and hopefully make an impact within some type of community, either domestically or internationally.
Now I'd like to hand it off to Tara.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tara DeWarsep. I'm a fourth-year PhD student in the Multi-Sector Communications program. I'm also a fellow in the Curriculum and Instruction PhD program and Managing Director of External Relations at Youth Communication, a nonprofit in New York City that's focused on amplifying youth voice through a teen writing program that does autobiographical journalism. And we publish those stories into magazines and social emotional learning curriculum and educator professional development. I have over 15 years of experience working in development and communications with international and local social impact organizations, which include working in Japan and Thailand.
Thank you, Tara. Oscar?
Hi everyone, my name is Oscar Manji. I'm a second year student here at St. John's University. I study biomedical sciences. As for what I do here, I am a two-time orientation leader. So when the kids come in for their orientation, I'm the one leading the kids around and showing them around campus. I'm the secretary of LASSO, so the Latin American Student Organization here. And lastly, I'm involved with campus ministry. This year will be my first plunge. We're gonna go to El Paso, Texas. And our main theme this year is to be educated and see for ourselves the border crisis.
Thank you so much, Oscar. And finally, for Rita.
My name is Farida Bouatira. I'm also a PhD student, PhD candidate on my fourth year as well in the School of Education, particularly focused on critical literacy. My background is as an educator in high school mathematics, as well as literacy interventionist and special education as well. My particular background in advocacy, well, it's been for the last 4 years. I am what you call an accidental advocate. I got into this for personal reasons. Two of my cousins were political prisoners. And then this is what dived me into this whirlwind of the UN and stumbling into disinformation at international level and really seeing it firsthand. Selective outrage and sharp power, really, and it's divisive, if you will, hands and tactics in the field. So this is something that I feel very strongly about, and actually, I'm doing my dissertation on.
Thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to dive right into our conversation. So let's begin with some questions to explore the concept of selective outrage. My first question is posed to you all. Can you share your personal understanding of what selective outrage is and how it manifests in everyday life? If we could start with Tara and then continue round robin.
Sure, thank you. So I'll start with sharing a bit about my research in my PhD and say that I've been focused on analyzing a data set of 44 years of teen journalism and what they've chosen to write about. So this is issues they cared about or were concerned about in the sociopolitical climate, including issues of their time that reach back to 1980. So when I've been looking at this data set, I've noticed a shift in the boxing and unboxing of identity in adolescence and how the public has responded to that. I'm thinking specifically about coming out as like trans, like gender identity, pronoun usage as forms of self-identification and how that's changed over time. And in terms of this panel, something that I was just thinking about when I was reflecting on the term selective outrage is thinking about adolescence and youth development and how, when I think of adolescence, I think of strong emotions, outrage notwithstanding, and, the prefrontal cortex, which manages emotion, is still developing, and so is abstract thinking. And when abstract thinking is developing in teen years, it allows young people to consider complex ideas, ethics, what if scenarios. It's an ability to understand and question societal norms, which often leads to taking strong idealistic stances as they're exploring their beliefs. I think that typically as we get older, we develop an ability for more flexible, nuanced thought processes, including like shades of gray, and things are not always as black and white. But I say typically, not necessarily. And I've noticed a shift in how adults have been identifying themselves and the pressure politically and socially that arises from the polarization that we've been seeing in our country, the increasing economic disparity. In my experience, I've witnessed selective outrage to be more of a performative thing at times to indicate group affiliation. And I guess, it's really a show of loyalty or commitment. And just a way of guiding how people want to be perceived. It doesn't necessarily always really reflect the inner processes or opinions of people, but it seems to be in our culture what I've seen a more of a shift towards performative selective outrage.
Thank you, Tara. Oscar?
Yeah, I feel like selective outrage, I actually wrote down here in my notes, so I'll say it verbatim. The pattern of expressing frustration over one topic, but not having the same energy towards another similar topic. Something that I've seen in in my personal life that I could relate to it is actually on campus. So I hang around the Honors Commons, so it's a lot of different people, different backgrounds, different political beliefs. So we each have like conversations every day, and one topic that stood out to me for selective outrage was the city, like specifically Manhattan area. People say how, oh, they're saying how, oh, like it's, you know, dirty, it's the garbage is all over the place, this and that. But when I ask them what they're gonna do about it, they don't really say anything. And it's almost like they're just mad at the topic, but they don't want to push any ideas or talk about the roots of why it could be dirty, why are they unhoused, and I ask them, oh, like, would you like to volunteer? Would you like to dive deeper into the topic? But it's just like almost they want to be mad and not take any action. So selective outrage to me is just being mad at a certain topic in life, but not really taking any action towards it. Um, yeah.
Thank you, Oscar. Sophia?
So going along with these two definitions, I agree that selective outrage is kind of rooted in that single, like zoning in on a single issue with ignoring related issues or issues that um, essentially cause the issue that you're mad at. Being the president of the Balkan Club, I experience this quite often. The Balkans is a region of the world that's very rooted in their own beliefs, and each country has kind of a similarity when it comes to the I guess the oppression of their people. It's very similar in terms of history, going back to the Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire, a lot of historical things. And I feel like what I've seen personally is a lot of people, they tend to focus on, you know, countries and how they've been affected without looking at the bigger picture and how they all have been affected. So they blame each other and they kind of use each other as scapegoats instead of trying to work together to overcome these hurts, I guess. So and you're going back to what Tara said, it is a form of loyalty to your affiliation, whether it's political, religious, cultural, and I think when I've seen the I guess selective outrage, it's been kind of ignorant to other outrages from other countries in terms of like a geopolitical, cultural selective outrage. So that's my take.
Thank you, Sophia. And Farida?
Thank you very much. Actually, I do appreciate actually going last. I feel like I can connect with all of you. First thing I would like to do, same as Oscar, actually, I would like to clarify my criteria for what I mean when I am speaking about it. The definition I put in, particularly for my dissertation, is selective outrage is a deeply embedded phenomenon that reflects the biases and systematic influences shaping individual and collective responses to societal issues. It involves prioritizing certain causes or injustices while marginalizing others of equal or greater significance. This selective emphasis often aligns with underlying motives. And the underlying motives I pick are political, ideological, or social, and can reinforce existing inequalities rather than resolve them. First thing I'd like to do is actually shout out Tara, because I absolutely 100% agree with you. As I had encountered personally, I do believe it is performative, as you said. And what was shocking for me, advocating at UN level, was particularly in the UPR, which is meant to be a power with mechanism, meaning we work together, all stakeholders, to come to a solution. And I was met with extreme disappointment from, to be quite honest with you, all parties involved, including the institution itself, which, like Sophia says, is entrenched in geopolitics. And forms of pressure, really, and divisiveness. And what was most disheartening for me was that there were false allegations of crime against humanity and genocide, and quite false, claimed to be by Algerian authorities. And all of that was done from, for example, Moroccan administrated, which, there's no secret the two have beef, if you will. The But what was most really disappointed was my fellow advocates, where we were advocating for freedom of speech, disinformation, things of that nature, fully aware of what was going on, fully aware that the allegations were false, but refused to speak. Either I got the common saying, "I will not defend them," or "Yeah, they didn't do this, but they did other things," or "What will people think?" So all of that brings us back to the question, right? Which is, it's just a matter of ethics. And unless we have clean platforms, which are really important for releasing of pressure, or as President Biden said, lower the temperature, um, this can potentially get out of hand and be really something that creates catastrophes when there are issues which are simple, like as not simple, but are far more simpler than, the fake allegation of genocide. These are freedom of speech. This is freedom of information. Those are on completely different levels. So again, Tara, I think what you said was like right on point. It was performative, but it's to the point where when does it stop? When do we take responsibility for things rather than simply, as Sophia said, point the finger and pin the blame? All right, that's it.
Thank you so much, everyone. My next question is directed towards Sophia. Can you think of a recent example, either on campus or in the news, where selective outrage played a role in public discourse?
So I'll have an example from both on campus and in the news. So on campus, I was involved with the sustainability committee with our student government, and I realized that a lot of the issues that we were focusing on were kind of surface level, and it was a great thing to be a part of, but being a student leader, being involved with student government, you're met with a lack of resources and you have to go with the most convenient options sometimes. So we were advocating for less food waste and less plastic use, single plastic use on campus, but we were kind of focusing on that as like a surface level problem, which I don't think is particularly our fault, I guess, but we weren't really looking at the systemic side of it. Why don't we have paper bags? Why do we use plastic bags? We weren't really using those type of questions. We were trying to plan out events that were vocalizing these issues, but in turn it was contributing to the issues in a way. We would, get products that were wrapped in plastic and provide food that would go to waste at the end. So it was kind of, I wouldn't say hypocritical, but counterintuitive in a way. And I wouldn't say that's, I mean, it is a problem at the end of it because we're advocating for something and then doing kind of the opposite and not really focusing on the systemic issues. So I guess that could create a discussion, which they have been doing. I know within the Institute of Ascension Impact, there's an Instagram page ran called Conserve to Serve, which is a great resource for people to gain, resources and ideas of how to have better habits. And I think that's a great tool. Having digital advocacy instead of more face-to-face advocacy is more practical in a college setting because of, our lack of knowledge and also our lack of funding and time, frankly. So I think that's a really important discourse that's been on campus. And just to throw in my other point, sorry, I'm talking so much. Recently I read that Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, hosted the COP29 conference, which was advocating for solar energy and more sustainable practices, but it kind of seems counterintuitive as well because they're one of the lead industries for oil and infrastructure. So it just seems kind of, I guess, confusing that people are advocating for this and then, their investments in like another capital side. So it just kind of seems like they don't really know what direction they're talking about in terms of energy and that may be taking away from other countries that don't have anything. And so that was just an interesting news thing that I saw recently that I wanted to share.
Thank you, Sophia. Tara, I wanted to direct the next question toward you. How do you feel that social media contributes or amplifies selective outrage? And do you think it's making the phenomenon worse?
Sure, thank you. From pronouns to political ideology, I feel like there's been a social trend of being increasingly forced to label ourselves. I mentioned before about the boxing and unboxing of identity and putting ourselves into a definable box. And in regards to social media, I'm seeing that even more in how it's being incentivized. In fact, it's somewhat of a cardinal rule of being an influencer that you need to know your audience and pick a side. Variation of content or changing of opinions tends to lose you followers. That is, unless you make it your brand to consider both sides. But even then, the algorithms tend to need to know how to sort you, and nuance is much harder to optimize searches towards. So I wanted to take this moment to also talk about this interesting phenomenon that's been happening since social media has come out and even before, but now there's a term for it in relation to social media. And it's a type of posting called rage baiting, where the person posting intentionally creates skits or records content that will incite the viewer to comment in a negative way. And, just thinking about this panel, I was reading a few articles about this, and I read one in the Rolling Stone that came out in February 2024, and they interviewed Jamie Cohen, who's has a doctorate in this. She's a assistant professor of digital culture and media at Queen's College, and I'll just quote something that she said here. And she was saying that there's an existing online tendency where the algorithm normalizes any type of content. So if rage becomes normal, then you have to up the ante consistently to become more and more extreme to increase engagement and work for the next posting. And, it's notable that the growth and prevalence of rage baiting content can make it continually harder for people to accurately fact check the videos in front of them. And it really does force people to either just react emotionally or just become less interested in searching for content they actually enjoy, and that you sort of become forced to live in an echo chamber. Where I think it's the most dangerous, in my opinion, is something that probably is on everybody's mind right now, is about how it could be used for political purposes and how maybe extreme sides on both sides and politicians can use it to gain engagement, increase votes for certain topics or people. And, just keeping that in mind, I'll end with one thing. So social media has incentivized engagement regardless of the content. And humans being humans, we often look for the highest return on our efforts in the least amount of time. And typically, what we've seen that happen in social media is that the investment in tapping into emotion is the quickest way to increase engagement. But in thinking about this, there's really no reason it has to be rage or negative emotions, right? So if any of you have heard of Mr. Beast, it's this influencer called Jimmy. His real name is Jimmy Donaldson. He has over 500 million followers across social media. He's the third most follower and creator in TikTok, and the one with the most subscribers in YouTube with over 333 million. And he got his major platform from giving away money and focusing on charitable purposes. But recently, he's now started participating in being a host for things like Squid Games and giving away money for pranks and competitions like that. So it's just something to think about in terms of the way that we interact with social media. We have the opportunity to maybe focus on other types of emotions and other types of socially positive outcomes that we want to have. And there's no reason that we have to focus on rage farming or rage baiting. We can focus on other more positive outcomes if we work together.
Thank you so much for that rich response, Tara. I have another question for the whole group. Do you think that there is a difference between selective outrage and choosing to prioritize certain issues based on personal or cultural relevance? Where should we draw the line? Farida, if I may start with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, I do believe that there is a difference. I believe there is a spectrum, as in all things, really. And I do think the binary and, as my colleague said, this divisive and just polarizing language really is the issue. And I do want to just stress out the algorithms one more time within disinformation, because again, once more, this is what I had noticed. And again, even in the international field where for example, the UN is still highly praised, but the reality of the narrative, multiple reports, is it is absolutely framed in a certain logic, or basically it's simple logic. It's framed as assertions, where if you break it down, again, simple Aristotle logic, right? You would see it stated as if it's an assertions, so assumptions, premises, things which are not proven are just taken as facts, and they are said, and they are said in a manner where the way the sentence is fabricated, it's already, pardon, the weights distribution of the words, for example. And then once you do the research on numerous reports that I've ran, I get to see that this is artificially done and it is optimized. It's actually optimized on 2/3, meaning the split between two parts is not even. When we do in thirds, we can't split something really even, not in words. It means it is primarily selective. It is unidirectional. The narrative is leading you. It is not doing where it's just presenting the information and allowing for the individual to process and choose. So in my opinion, is that absolutely there's a difference. But I think what we have to do in our methodology as human rights defenders, as activists, is again not rules. We can't be rigid with rules. We have to be bedrock with principle. And the reason I said that is because rules change. Social media change. It just kind of threw like a curveball at us, and now it's just like we have to adapt. But principle of ethics and in research, we have to show, particularly for me, in my experience, where I was basically advocating for or against pretrial detention and leniency towards that, was Algeria, for example, on a global level, is on the bottom 25 percentile as far as using pretrial detention. However, what we have seen as citizens, as individuals, was within the last 5 years, particularly 2019 to 2021, was an accelerated rate. So it went really from about 12% to 19%. So what does that mean? Really, the research has to be out there. We have to show, you know what, on a global level, and context is so important. On a global level, sure, it's not the worst, but there is a cultural impact as a country that's post-colonial, as very revolutionary personalities of our expectation. And we do stand out as Algerians among other nations, and it's one of the lowest in Africa, for example. But the hike, particularly within that small window, is very concerning. So, in aspect, both sides are right. And what I've seen in the narrative really is kind of the exaggeration, and once more, as Tara mentioned, with the algorithms and the disinformation, is these polarizing words saying they always, most of, when it's not to deny people's realities, but quite evidently it's marginal. Like I say, even if it's one person in prison or no person in prison, but potentially in 10 years there might be half a person, we still advocate because it's important, because we're building a culture. But we have to be, I think, honest. First is honesty. Second is access. If, we have to ensure that either we have the qualification or reach out to other people that do, and ensure that our research and our sources are, accurate and responsible.
Thank you, Farida. Sophia?
Yes, perfectly said. That was very well like it was very detailed and reached everything basically that I wanted to say as well. I agree with the fact that it is a spectrum, selective outrage, and prioritizing certain causes, and then they do overlap in a lot of times, I would say. But I guess the root difference between the two is the knowledge behind it and the education that comes with each side. So if you're focusing on a certain issue because of personal or cultural relation to it, you most likely are going to do your research and reach out to people and make sure you have the necessary equipment and resources to really focus on that issue and try and address that issue. And I think that differs from selective outrage, because I think with selective outrage it could be more like a following, like that loyalty, going back to the root definition we mentioned, being involved in an issue because your community is involved with it and not really knowing what it is, just knowing that it is an issue. I think that is the biggest difference, because when you're prioritizing a certain issue, you're making sure that that issue is being addressed. And I think that selective outrage isn't about addressing the issue in terms of actual action. It's about addressing it, that it exists. And yeah, I guess that would be my overall answer, is that they do differ, but they also overlap to an extent. And I think that overlapping comes with education and also incentives, and how incentivized you are to address that issue compared to just think about it and without any, I guess, acknowledgement of other issues.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Oscar?
Yes. First, I want to say great answers by both panelists. You guys are very well spoken. But yes, there is certainly a difference between choosing topics that you encounter on a day-to-day basis than selective outrage. Uh, for example, I'm going to include a topic of machismo. In Latin American circles, machismo is when the man in the household is expected to fulfill a man's duties, be the traditional man, don't show any femininity. In fact, if you show it, you're viewed as less as a man. But this line of thinking can cause common buildup of emotions within a man, can cause disconnected households, disconnected from the father and the daughter, because the man can't say certain things to the daughter. So I included that example because it is cultural. So I feel like if someone wants to go out and solve something in the world, yes, they're going to choose something that they can closely relate to because it impacts them on a day-to-day basis. You're not going to go solve something across borders first when you know that there's a problem that you see in your household, that you see in other, I'm saying Latino because I am Dominican, that you see in other Latino households. You're going to be also more educated on that topic because you see it every day. You hear stories about it every day. So yes, I feel like there is a difference between selective outrage and problems that are closely tied to cultural or personal beliefs because one is going to be naturally more educated on it. And from a local level, like I'm going to say Westbury because I'm from Westbury, Long Island. From a local level, you're going to see kids who go to your public high school. You're going to see the teachers there. So you're going to know, okay, they have X, Y, and Z resources. I can volunteer at the local art center and talk to them. Maybe they have problems in the household. Maybe they have this. So you're going to want to solve problems that you see on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I encourage people to talk and explore topics that they're comfortable in, but there might be some overlap if you're not willing to expand from your local bubble of comfortability and cultural. And so I say you're educated on what you see around you, but there has to be a point where you breach out of it and you're willing to be included in conversations that are not tied to you at all. Yeah.
That's a really good point, Oscar, about that cultural, to use a word that Sophia used, loyalty, and that feeling like you want to solve the problems that adhere to you most. And that definitely is part of this conversation as well. Tara?
Thank you. I was just saying that I was thinking a bit about how research has shown that we're actually quite bad at accurately perceiving true levels of outrage online. Apparently, we're really good at just modeling the behaviors of those in our social groups. So just bringing it back to, again, the performative aspect of things and how we tend to join in, whether or not we actually feel a sense of outrage or moral responsibility to respond to the content or behavior that sparked the initial reactive engagement. So I think that in terms of just what we feel like is really going to, um, tap into our personal or cultural relevance, I think we have to look to, as Oscar was saying, the people we're surrounded with, what we really feel like we're connected to, and how we respond to that.
Exactly. And to your point, Tara, to lead into my next question, which is actually directed to you, Oscar, we're talking about this idea of performance when we talk about selective outrage and the research that you offered us, Tara, about us really just kind of being big copycats. Oscar, what's your take on this idea of performative activism as synonymous with selective outrage, and how can we assure that our actions are aligning with meaningful change?
Yeah, so I was reading this, and it is easy and I won't say it's quick to say that they're the same thing. However, I feel like they have the same core in which people put on a facade to shy away from issues or look better to their friends or to the public. However, selective outrage is more of an emotion. I feel like performative activism, you're going to do something in order to almost gain validation. So I'll say one is emotional and one is action. An example of performative activism is actually, I'm going to use a topic that I wrote about when I was in high school. Volunteerism. People would go to other countries, for example, maybe Nicaragua. They would go on a maybe 1 week course and just, spend time over there, go on a little tour, go to a hotel, do what they need to do, etc. Then for 2 days, they will go to their local volunteer shelter and maybe meet the kids in Nicaragua. However, people judge volunteerism because people view it as more of as a resume builder because you are just going to another country to, are you going there to have fun or are you going there to actually solve an issue? And many people view it as, no, they just want to feel good about themselves. That's why they want to do it split half and half. So I feel like this could tie back to my previous answer, and we can ensure that our actions line with meaningful change when we're passionate about said topic. You want to do and solve issues in which you have a true compassion about, and you don't want to tackle on or be a part of something bigger if you're not really aligned with the core of it. So I would say start off again, like I said, like start off small in your circle, do what you could tackle, do what you're educated in. And if you want to reach out, be educated in it and don't do it just to gain validation from friends or don't do it just because you want to expand your resume on.
Thank you, Oscar. That was really thoughtful. Farida, I wanna ask you this question as you've kind of outlined for us in our time together today, some of the work that you do in taking a focused look at the UN and its functions, and also just being a PhD candidate yourself. What would you say that as student leaders would be the best way to navigate these issues of selective outrage within leaders' own communities and their roles?
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you, Oscar, for being such a good segue for leading into that. And I think I'm going to point out Oscar one and just kind of shout him out because it is absolutely, I think, reflective, and the beauty about being in our school, right, where we focus so much on ethics. And to be honest, I never thought I would. To this level appreciate it so much because it does put a core in you to, as Oscar said, reflect. It doesn't have to be external, but I think the biggest issue is take a step back and reflect and ask yourself truly, honestly, why am I doing this for? And I think that can help us with the first thing that I do want to talk about is not simply just accuracy. We'll put accuracy to the side, but risk mitigation, and not, inadvertently cause a disaster. Particularly, I do want to mention this: in the UN, and in talking to, for example, part of the UPR is it's a power with mechanism, meaning we all work together. It's not an authoritative; it has no power over. The rhetoric that went all over the report that was supposed to be a summary of the stakeholders' report only addressed our top issue as advocates, and I took a survey by 1%. The most important topic for all advocates covered 1%. The rest, over 30%, was geopolitically driven and false accusations. So the narrative also was all assertive. It was all as if it's like a complete misunderstanding of the mechanism within itself. None of the recommendation or tone for a country that prides itself as a decolonizer, right, could they have taken. So it's a setup for failure from the start. This was something that angered me deeply. And even during the UN, as I made my speech and whatnot, as an advocate, and I very direct. I gave, explicit exactly the laws, which we felt honestly were not effective, as in a sense as they weren't produced well. They were produced well, but they were not with this particular time frame, if you will, with this information, with echo chambers, particularly and specifically targeting advocates and young men. Because of this, because of the emotion, because of as Tara said, emotional development and things of that nature, these laws do not do enough to protect individuals. They are basically to punish, to penalize. But I do dare say that these individuals are victims of the circumstance. And so laws and things of that nature, we need to advocate for policy that basically is evolved or is to this timeline and addresses this current thing. And again, we go back to principle. Rules, it's not to be rigid with rules. Rules are not always going to apply. We evolve as human beings, the situation change. But our principle has to be bedrock. And again, this is what it comes down to ethics. For example, part of the UPR process is for us advocates to go to numerous countries and basically give our take with evidence what they should recommend to Algeria. And really, we all focused on the same recommendations, which is the release of prisoners, where we got a whopping 1. I'm proud to say it was by the United States of America. So, that was the only why. And because you start to see, as Sophia said, geopolitical campaigns where there's an overemphasis, for example, even as you mentioned, the Balkans themselves, the countries, an overemphasis on the Balkans and underemphasis on Western countries. Or even as we say, fossil fuels, right? There's such climate change, 100%. However, we don't talk about nuclear waste. It's way worse. Why? Because it's to the convenience or certain Western powers, if you will, particularly the twin engines, as we like to call them. France is number 1 with, nuclear waste. In Nigeria, for example, a country so rich with resources, yet the poorest. So there's so much of this selective rage that we need to watch out, and we live it on a daily basis. For example, I'm advocating for Algeria, but I do recognize and see the overemphasis on Balkan states and the underemphasis on Western nations. So when I see it, I call it out. When my words were changed, I called it out. In fact, I did some kind of a gutsy move where 2 days before the recommendations, I did the statistics, the research, and I sent it to every single mission within the United Nations, every single state. The result, we didn't get the recommendations for false accusations. But there are situations at times where where you feel as if following the rules would be unethical. Meaning, for example, the organization I worked for got funding. I chose to stay volunteer. Why? Because I saw where it was getting politicized, and I saw that if I was paid for the salary, then my work would no longer be mine, and it would be used, in a manner that would basically be strangling, if you will, of a nation, a geopolitical motive, and it had nothing to do. Now, had I done that, you would roll out the red carpet for you. It would all be to my interest. But there's a reality: is I came into this genuinely for my cousins, and the odd part about it is somehow the speech is nothing happened, but through that actions, we did end up getting my cousins released. So it turns out this whole big bad government that doesn't listen at the end did value our opinion and did listen when they saw that we were willing, to take responsibility and step up to the plate. Our patriotism our advocacy comes from patriotism. Okay, like it's not disloyalty to criticize, and I think that's also very important to say. It's not to hold back. It's not to not speak the truth, but we have to be objective, not neutral, and not go with narrative, as Oscar said, because it's appealing to us, okay, or it works to our advantage. And there's a reality that we have to risk mitigate. We have to be educated, once more, as Oscar said. We have to adapt. Because of algorithms, we have to be well researched into logic and actually break the arguments down, see what's the weight. How is this presented? Is this leading me? There has to be critical thinking and critical literacy, because the reality is with sharp power and its divisiveness, it's genuine, good intentioned advocacy becomes instrumentalized. And what that does is it not only polarizes, but now the other side will not even listen. Who pays? The people who are already in prison. That's beyond unethical. Everyone wants to advance, but not on other people's backs. And this was my speech, for example, at the UN. When I met with the representatives for Algeria, right after the meeting, as you meet with all others and shake their hands, I was told by other NGOs that I secretly worked for the Algerian government, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it's to show you the selective outrage. The interesting part is after that meeting was done, the individuals were speaking to me like no problem, but they told me, oh, why did you do that next to people? But I said, that's what the activity is. We meet with everyone. We're trying to create. But as you can see, a lot of it is for show. I think, honestly, the panel, thank you so much for all the words that you see. You have made it so much easier. Sophia said, overemphasis on certain crowds, geopolitically used. As Oscar said, we have to ethically look at ourselves and reflect, why am I doing this for? And there are boundaries, ethical boundaries that we have to place in ourselves. And I think, as Tara said, we have to look back through the algorithms. We have to notice what is being done. And we have to you have to have the background, if you will, in willing to research. Okay. And the other thing is inclusivity. And we have to speak to everybody in the spectrum, not just the side that appeals to us. Because what occurs is it's going to take it to a certain level where, for example, in logic, you can use the word some, right? Some could be anything mathematically. It could be from 1 to 99%. But what happens when you use it 50 times? When I say some people were not released on time, some people were suffering, some people were this, it presents an echo chamber of a false reality where it creates a perception of this awful surrounding, when some could be one. And can we ever say, you cannot argue, the counter. We can't say there aren't some people who don't get fair trials, because that's arguing an absolute. That's arguing that all people get, and which we all know is false. So I think we have to critically think, and honestly, the role models, or as I like to call them, the greats of human rights defenders. You have Nelson Mandela, you have Gandhi, and honestly, let's put ourselves in their perspective and see what would they do. And I think the answer would come quite clear. Are our actions aligned? So thank you so much. Sorry if I overspoke.
No, that was really beautifully said, Farida. I think when we talk about how important it is as leaders to do the things that you are saying, like to stand up for what you believe in, sometimes money cannot be the factor by which you are choosing whether or not to advocate for something. to commit to doing your research, to being Socratic in your studies, to exploring the sides that are maybe adhering to what you believe in, as well as the ones that you disagree with. And so that's really what the exercise is in preventing this being stuck in selective outrage. And really, the point of our discussion, our being here today, is to have discussions about how we mitigate this performative action, how we ensure that we are thinking of the global community when we are in places and spaces where we can advocate. And so I want to kind of close out this panel by inviting folks to ask some questions. We do have some questions here, so I'll get started with them, but if anyone would like to send, please feel free to. The first question I have here to read out: how do we deal with instances where selective outrage is deeply ingrained in political or cultural divides? Is it possible to have productive dialogue around this? I'll put that in the chat just so the panelists can see.
I can say my 2 cents here. In my class yesterday, I was talking a bit about my personal experience going through different geographic areas in the United States and visiting family that fall on different parts of the political spectrum, and how I was really shocked in some ways, not so shocked, but regardless of where you were in terms of far left or far right, there was actually a lot of similar language used, but it's just like flipping whose name was like fill in the blank. And there's that part of where you become so extreme that you meet in the middle again, and you have more in common with your outrage than you do in terms of actually seeking to make some positive change in the world, or to work towards policies that are able to be implemented if you're just always being outraged. So in terms of having productive dialogue, I think that what you said before about having a real focus on just not living in an echo chamber, making sure that we're outside of our own comfort zones and always questioning and really focusing on critical thinking. When we are so polarized, there's an erosion of trust in the community and within ourselves. And I think that what we have to do is try and, on a personal level, I think in whatever ways we can, focus on building trust within our community so that we can have these conversations and they're not just, as much as I enjoy this, not just only in the university setting.
Thank you. Other thoughts on this question?
I can have some remarks as well. This is basically the whole mission of my Balkan Cultural Society here on campus. Like I mentioned in the beginning, it is a very polarized region due to a lot of different reasons, whether that be economic, religious. There was a war there in the 90s, and it can be very, very hard to, have people kind of oversee these differences, what they think are differences, but in reality are actually similarities, whether going back to what Tara said, between polarization and using a lot of the same language, but filling in different names or scenarios that can be easily compared. It is, sorry, let me just reread the question. Yeah, so it can be deeply ingrained in our political beliefs and our culture because of what's passed down to us through word of mouth, through family, through friends, and that, that society, that community that you're in, that influences a lot of your beliefs, and how you respond is based on how other people respond. So I think it is possible to have productive dialogue, and this is why I formated the Balkan Club, because I am very connected with the Balkans. I lived in Croatia for 4 years, and there's not a big enough Croatian population on campus to have a Croatian club. So I decided to have the Balkan Club because, yes, to promote the dialogue of community and diversity and unity between this region, but also to create a safe space for people who can't really relate to, you know, American culture all the way. And they, like we mentioned in our student leader training here with Dana, is identity. And that is something that I struggle with, and I know a lot of people struggle with. And I think, I don't really know how to articulate myself here, but I think it's more valuable to see commonalities than to focus on differences. And once people see those things, they're more likely to overcome whatever biases they have. And I think having organizations on campus that are multicultural can really help start sparking these conversations. So last semester, I brought in Fred Cocazelli. He's a professor here at St. John's. I think he's head of the government and politics. He lived in Kosovo for a year with Catholic Relief Services, and I had him come in and give a Western perspective on what he thinks the Balkans is like, because he spent time there, and it's an unbiased opinion on, you know, the dynamic that takes place there. And so people can't really be like, well, of course he would say that he's from this country, because he's not. He's just an objective spectator. And I thought that was a really good way to get people thinking about, you know, their role in this dilemma of the Balkans and how they interact. So yes, I think dialogue can be productive and can be important, and it can be eye-opening. And I think that's what we need to be doing going forward in any situation, whether it's political, cultural, or just like opinions that you formed.
If I may chime in.
Yes.
So thank you so much for mentioning Professor Cocazelli. He was actually really quite instrumental for helping me with my first event when I first started actually with advocacy. He is the department chair for political science, an absolutely wonderful person. So yes, one of the things that honestly you learned from my first degree, which was in political science, and even here, is I think we need to change the culture a little bit. And I think it's slowly happening and manifesting almost like on a subconscious level for all of us. For example, one of my new unsung heroes is Liz Cheney. But never in my life did I think that I would, you know, align with the super conservative, if you will, but particularly on the simple fact, not even to talk to the politics, is simply going against the popular opinion and just sticking to your, if you will, ethical core. And I think we need to change the narrative as to it's okay to change your mind. It's not a competition to go in to force yourself or your opinion. And I think we go in almost like with blinders on in conversations now and just focus forward. It's okay to change your mind. It doesn't take, doesn't take anything from you. In fact, it can enhance your argument. And oftentimes we realize that we don't really have an argument. We just have a lot of emotions. So I do think, yes, absolutely, there's a lot of things that are ingrained. And I think we need to two things that we need to address. The first thing would be, of course, the cultural aspect, and we need to foster a environment that's inclusive. And to make sure that it is not just in the spectrum of people that we agree with. We have to, I feel, as myself included, understand, and throughout my research, I almost did like a 360, multiple rotations around of opinion, because it's almost like you cannot go in with the mentalities, I'm not going to change my mind and I know everything. Because the more you know you don't know. And so I do feel we have to put our ego down and our guard down a little bit and really listen to other conversations, and you will find that you can identify with most people, or you can understand really at the very least. But really what we need to do is, I think, create a culture where it's okay to change your mind. And I think, because at this point it's becoming almost like on both sides, but none of us are listening. And it's okay to change your mind. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you lost. I think that kind of attitude really is what is divisive. And all in all, at least we can have these conversations in this country. So we can criticize night and day, but we all primarily believe that we are able to, at least this was our core belief, right? Lately, things have a little bit changed, because of social media and things of that nature, but at least we can. We need to decolonize, I feel like, our brain and our ways of thinking. And that can be done in this environment if we take care of it. And if we do, as Oscar said, really reflect and see, why am I doing this? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again to all of our panelists for your thoughtful contributions and to everyone who joined us for today's discussion, including those who might be watching later on YouTube. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding what selective outrage is to exploring how it affects activism, social justice, and even our global communities. It's clear that while selective outrage can be a powerful motivator for social change, it also comes with significant challenges, especially when it prevents us from engaging consistently with all forms of injustice. I want to speak to just a closing, a quote to leave you all with that actually features in my email signature. It's from The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House, which is an essay written by Audre Lorde. And she says in that essay, without community, there is no liberation, only the most vulnerable and temporary armistice between an individual and her oppression. Survival is learning to make our differences into strengths. As we wrap up today's event, I encourage you all to continue reflecting on those questions and take them into your daily life. Engage with these complex issues, challenge your own assumptions, and realize it's okay to change your mind. Thank you again to all of our panelists and to everyone who participated today. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we hope to see you at future discussions. Thank you.